All right.
Actually, let me.
Good morning.
I just emailed Heather saying I couldn't get in, but I used yesterday's link and here I am.
Yes, it's always the same link. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning and welcome to the September business meeting of the Council on Post-Secondary Education. As a reminder, this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube for the general public. Council members must have their audio and video on to participate in the meeting, but please keep your microphone muted otherwise. Due to a council member needing to leave a little bit early, I'd like to go ahead and rearrange the agenda. I propose we move up item 8 on the agenda, which is the report and action items from the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee to occur directly before the presentation from Moody's. If anybody has objections to that, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll rearrange the agenda a little bit. I would also like to thank the campus presidents who have joined us today for the morning session with Moody's. We'll get to that shortly, but we do have a few housekeeping items to address first. So, Heather, will you call the roll, please?
Perfect timing. Good morning. We have some new members on our roll call. So I do this in alphabetical order by last name. Dr. Mohammed Babar, Mr. Ronald Beal.
Here.
Mr. Colby Burks.
Here.
Chair Ben Brandsetter.
Here.
Mr. Eric Ferris.
Here.
Vice Chair Kim Hallbauer is joining. She was having a little trouble with the link. I'll come back. Miss Lori Harper.
Here.
Mr. Lucas Minzer.
Here.
Miss Donna Moore. Miss Christy Nelson. Yep, I see you. Mr. Richard Nelson.
Here.
Miss Vidya Ravichandran.
Here.
Dr. Robert Statt.
Here.
Mr. Kevin Weaver.
Here.
Miss Carol Wright. And Commissioner Jason Glass. All right, and Miss Kim Hallbauer? She's here, I see her. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. We do have 3 people where today is their first official business meeting. First off is Colby Burks. I'm trying to find him on my screen. He's wearing a tie today. Look at that. As you may remember, he was recently appointed by Governor Beshear to fill the council student representative position through next summer. He's a first-year law student at the University of Louisville and recently graduated from Morehead State University, where he served as student body president as well as the chair of the board of student body presidents last year. We're glad to have you aboard. Colby, if you wouldn't mind take a couple minutes, just let us give us any more background and just introduce yourself to the rest of the members as well.
Yeah, for anybody that doesn't know me, my name's Colby Burks. Like he said, I'm a first-year law student at the University of Louisville Brandeis School of Law. I did my undergraduate at Morehead State, which was a wonderful, wonderful experience where I got to work with the Board of Student Body Presidents and as student body president there, just doing stuff like trying to initiate policies to make higher education more attainable for a large group of people, especially those with disabilities on Morehead's campus. I really look forward to serving on the CPE this year. I have a lot of ideas that I know that everyone will share with me in a pursuit to make higher education the best it can be for all types of people in Kentucky. And like I said, I'm just very excited to get started. And I think that I have a very unique opportunity being at University of Louisville now, such a large institution, but also spending 4 years at a regional institution as well. I think I just have a perspective in both areas for the needs of students of Kentucky. And so I'm excited to see how that helps me out in my position.
Thank you, Colby. We also have 3 new members that were appointed by the governor. Paperwork came through yesterday, 2 of which are able to join us today. Eric Ferris is a senior partner and attorney of Buckman, Ferris, and Mills, and lives in Louisville. Eric, would you mind just taking a couple minutes and introducing us to yourself?
Well, good morning, everyone. Yeah, actually, I grew up in my law practice is in Shepherdsville, Bullitt County, home of the Jim Beam Claremont Distillery, Dr. Thompson, which is probably our best claim to fame in Shepherdsville. My practice of 38 years has evolved into education, school law, K through 12 law, and land development work in Bullitt, which is booming with the UPS I-65 connection we have there. I'm the son of educators, and my parents, my dad went to UK on the GI Bill, met my mother there. So they're both UK grads. I went to U of L undergrad, UK law school. So education has been a big part of our life. Our daughter is a teacher, Chicago Public Schools, and so I'm looking forward to being a part of this board. Very honored to serve.
All right, thank you, Eric. Our other new member that's joined us today is Kevin Weaver. Kevin is an attorney at Sturgill, Turner, Barker, and Maloney, and lives in Lexington. Kevin, would you give us a little bit more background on yourself?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm an attorney in Fayette County, as I learned yesterday watching your all's meeting, and a native of Warren County. And I have two daughters, a freshman in college and a junior in high school. And our practice here in Lexington's got about 30 attorneys. We do a lot of education law. That's not my particular area of focus, but I do get to kind of work around the edges of it and learn about some of the issues. But I look forward into diving deeper into those with you all, and just appreciate the opportunity.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Our third new member is Babar. He's an attending physician at St. Mary and Elizabeth Hospital, and is medical director at 6 other healthcare and rehab centers, and he also lives in Louisville as well. We'll allow him to give a full background on himself at his next meeting. However, before we get any further, we do need to make these appointments official, and we are pleased to have Judge Houston Wells join us from Franklin County Judge Executive, who's going to be delivering the oath of office. So, Judge Wells, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I'll go back to Mr. Ferris that in Franklin County we have Jim Beam as well, and I'll trump that with Buffalo Trace. So I'm glad you all have part of Jim Beam, but we're glad we have the other part. So there you go.
We'll have to debate that. We'll have to debate that another time. I know.
All right. We'll look forward to that meeting. Okay. The Mr. Burks, Mr. Ferris, and Mr. Weaver. Yeah, we're going to do the oath of office, and this is the new norm. And in this type of Zoom meeting and doing the oath of office, at the end, if you will state your name and say I do or I will as part of the oath at the end, or you'll say nor aided, assisted in any person that's offending to help you God, and you'll say no, we haven't. So that's how the oath goes, that you haven't fought a duel or any of those kinds of things. So that's the actual statement that you'll need to make at the end. Just state your name and then you have it. Okay. So with that being said, if all three of you, Mr. Burks, Mr. Ferris, and Mr. Weaver, if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as you continue a citizen thereof, and that you will faithfully execute to the best of your ability the office of the member of the Council on Post-Secondary Education? And according to law, do you further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, you being a citizen of this state have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within this state nor out of it, nor have you sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have you acted as second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending, so help you God.
Eric Ferris, I will, I do, and I have not so offended the Constitution.
Thank you.
Kevin Weaver, and I so affirm.
I'm Colby Burks, and I do and have never fought a duel, I promise.
Thank you. Congratulations and all the best to you. Thank you for serving our great state and always making us better. Thank you so much. And
Judge.
thank you, Dr. Thompson. And by the way, Dr. Thompson, I wanted to show you something you gave me, and I'm drinking coffee from my Kentucky State mug that you gave me several years ago. Thank you so much. And Miss, let's see, the lady that is it Miss Weaver, Miss Fair, Miss
Faisy.
Miss Faisy, I apologize. There's a lot of names. If you need me to swear in Dr. Barr, if we need to do that, or if you need any other assistance from us, any paperwork, just let our Miss Tamber Harrod know. Okay.
Will, thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless all of you. Thank you for serving our great state of Kentucky. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to Judge Houston Wells for that, and appreciate him doing that over Zoom today. We do have one more person that joined us that is new to this group as well. He's got a gaming headset on down there, and it is Jason Glass. Jason, I think this is your second day on the job, if I'm not mistaken, but I would like for you to take a couple minutes and introduce us to yourself and say hello.
Well, thanks, Benjamin. Yes, this is my second day. I came back. They let me come back, so I guess that's a good sign that I made it 24 hours and am back on the job. I'm between meetings, but I did want to pop over and just introduce myself and say hi and how much I'm looking forward to getting to know and work with all of you. Of course, Dr. Thompson is also on the State Board of Education, so we've got that close connection. He's one of my 13 bosses, so when he calls, I will respond immediately. But I'm really excited about getting to work with all of you and the even through these really challenging times, what the Department of Education can do and what I can do as commissioner to support the work of this council. Rob Akers is going to be on here today to give you an update of some things that are happening on the K-12 side through COVID and the other initiatives that we've got underway. But just wanted to pop in and start establishing this relationship. And it's interesting to hear all these dual affirmations or declining that you fought in duels. It's been a long time since I've been in Kentucky, about 2 decades, and I forgot that was part of the oath. And it's always fun to hear that again.
All right. Jason, thank you for taking a few minutes out of your second day in the office, and we look forward to seeing you at our next meeting.
Thanks,
let's see. Next item is approval of minutes. The minutes from our June 19th council meeting are in your materials. Are there any objections to those as presented? If none, they are approved as distributed. Item number 4 on our agenda today is a proposed council resolution. We have one council resolution to consider adopting this morning. At the end of this month, KCTCS President Jay Box will be retiring. Staff have prepared a resolution for you, and I'd like to read that now. This is a resolution honoring and commending J.K. Box for his service to the Kentucky Community and Technical College System and post-secondary education in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Whereas Dr. J. Box served as the second president of the Kentucky Community and Technical College System from November 19, 2014 through September 30th, 2020, and through his leadership and vision, deepened its commitment to academic preparation and workforce training. And whereas prior to being named president, Dr. Box served KCTCS as both a vice president and chancellor from 2007 to 2014, and as president of Hazard Community Technical College from 2002 to 2007. And whereas Dr. Box has been a passionate advocate for rebuilding America's middle class by forming partnerships between higher education and employers, providing multiple pathways for students' long-term success, and ensuring a seamless transfer for those pursuing a four-year degree. And whereas Dr. Box has contributed his talents and leadership to numerous national, state, and local boards, including the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board, the National Council of State Directors of Community Colleges, the Kentucky Business Education Roundtable, and the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, among other academic and civic organizations. And whereas Jay and his wife Gail have been friends and partners of the Council on Post-Secondary Education throughout their careers and have been passionate advocates for adult education. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Council on Post-Secondary Education does hereby adopt this resolution on September 15th, 2020, for President Jay Box, congratulating him on his achievements, thanking him for his dedication and service, and wishing him good fortune in his retirement. Aaron, would you like to make any additional comments before we have a resolution for this?
Indeed, I would. Thank you, Chair Branstetter. You know, Jay and I go way back. We came to Frankfurt together, 2009. Worked really hard on doing a variety of things. One of the things that I figured out fairly quickly, Jay was an easy guy to work with. He had a lot of knowledge, but he pushed hard. And a lot of people don't know this, but Jay and I worked really hard to shape the first real transfer system that went into law that has worked in Kentucky and actually is considered the transfer system of all the states. Many have copied off of us, Jay, with the way we did that. And bringing the community and technical colleges together with their four-year institutions, and really designing when I leave, Jay, and go to that place you're going, I will actually be as happy about that as anything we've ever done. But the item I'll be the most happy about is to call you my friend and getting to know you at the level we've gotten to know each other. We'll miss you, brother. We'll keep in contact with you, and I know you'll miss us, even though you won't say it now. I really appreciate your time with us. And also, just to let you know, Jay has spent a lot of time being the convener of the presidents. And so I know our colleagues, our four-year institution colleagues, will also miss you. Have a good retirement, my friend, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Dr. Box, would you like to say a few words as well?
Yes, thank you, Chair Branstetter. It's very, very nice of the council to recognize me today with this resolution. I would like to say this first and foremost: the leadership of Aaron Thompson and for CPE and for our state has made a huge difference. His emphasis on pushing all of us to be more productive, and the performance-based funding model is one of the models in the nation that is showing that Kentucky is committed to increasing the number of citizens with a college credential. And I really applaud his leadership on that. I also want to say thank you to the 8 public university presidents on their leadership and their friendship over the years. It's a great group. Bob, thank you so much for your leadership as the convener this year. We really appreciate that. But it's been an honor serving Kentucky for over 18 years in the Kentucky Community and Technical College system. I do believe we're the big success story for the Higher Education Reform Act back in 1997, and that KCTCS is really making access possible for people who did not have that opportunity 20 years ago, and that we are now really focused on not only providing access, but completion and success for our students. Thank you very much.
Chair Branstetter, can I say one other thing? I'm sorry. The point I want to say, when Jay took over this job as president of the system, I remember the first week we sat down and looked at his completion numbers, his retention numbers, and so on. Jay made it a dedication, brought his team together, and he says, this is our #1 goal. If you guys get a chance just to look at what's happened in those 5 years, around completion and retention, you'll be amazed. J-Box, I appreciate you focusing on that. I appreciate your focusing on those that have historically been the most disenfranchised when you did that. So I want to say personally a thanks to you for that kind of leadership.
Hear, hear.
All right. The resolution is in your materials for review. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Stat, second by Luke Menser. All those in favor, aye.
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 All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Dr. Box, thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for your service. And we'll get you the hard copy. We can't get that virtually today, but we'll figure something out. So thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, we do need to move up item 8 in our agenda. So I would like to go ahead and ask Lori Harper, the chair of the ASI committee, to give her report along with the committee's recommendations. Lori?
Great. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Brandstetter. The Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee met on August 18th, and the report from that meeting is in your materials. We've received an update of the fall 2020 campus reopening plans, as well as an update on CPE's research agenda. Staff also gave us an insight as to the work of the newly formed Student Advisory Group and the P20 initiatives in progress. Finally, we were given an inside look at the academic program review project being completed by Gray's Associates. Action items we reviewed include the proposal of 4 new academic programs. Campus representatives discussed each program and answered the committee's questions sufficiently, and the committee is recommending the approval of all 4. First, the committee recommends the approval of 2 new programs at Northern Kentucky University, a Bachelor's of Science in Applied Software Engineering and a Doctor of Occupational Therapy. At the University of Kentucky, the committee recommends the approval of a PhD program in health services research. And at Murray State University, the committee recommends an educational specialist degree in agricultural education. The committee also reviewed proposed revisions to the new academic program approval policy that would become effective after today. The revisions were developed by working with institutional representatives to streamline the process and align it more closely with the requirements of SACSCOC, S-A-C-S-C-O-C, and changes the process. It substantive changes process. And the committee represents that the council approved the revisions as proposed. The program summaries for the programs and the revised policy are in your board materials, and the CPE's Melissa Bells is available to respond to any questions if there are any at this time. If there are none, Chair Brandstetter, I turn this back over to you for a motion and a vote.
All right. Thank you, Lori. On behalf of the committee, Ms. Harper has presented 4 new academic programs and a revised policy for new academic program approval. May I have a motion to accept the committee's approval recommendations?
So moved.
I see Dr. Stack speaking. I'll take Dr. Statt and Richard Nelson on the second, if that's all right. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you to the ASI for looking at those as well. Next up is item 5 in our agenda, discussion with Moody's Investor Services, which will address the current credit status of higher education sector as it confronts business disruption driven by the coronavirus pandemic. Our guests today will review initiatives universities are taking to adapt, how this could change the higher education landscape, beyond the current year and Kentucky's current status in comparison to other states. Those of you who have been with us for the last couple of years will remember Moody's talking to us, I think about 2 years ago at our Frankfurt office, and gave their initial initial view, and we felt like this was a good time to come back and just take another snapshot of where we are. And we appreciate them taking their time, and we've had a number of initial phone calls to discuss this content as well. The format of this session will be similar to a webinar. There are prepared slides and comments. A Q&A session will follow to our council members and university presidents on Zoom. I do ask you that you use the raise hand function in order to be called on, or simply type your question in a private message within Zoom to Heather so she can relay it appropriately. For those watching on YouTube, please feel free to type your questions in the live chat feature so those can be relayed to us as well. With that, let me introduce our speakers today from Moody's Public Finance Group that specializes in higher education and not-for-profit organizations. Mary Kay Cooney is Vice President and Senior Analyst. Susan Fitzgerald is an Associate Managing Director, and Kendra Smith is the Managing Director. So ladies, I'm going to turn that over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Susan, did you want to open up with a few comments first?
Sure, I'll start with a few comments. Mary Kay is going to be doing the bulk of this presentation. She is our senior analyst in Kentucky. But I did just want to open with an acknowledgement that as we do this presentation, we're looking at the higher education sector through a very specific lens, which is a credit lens, an ability and willingness to repay debt, the likelihood of default and recovery on default. So it is very much a financial lens through which we're looking at the impact of the coronavirus epidemic, and just wanted to acknowledge up front that we know that you on the ground are looking at it and weighing a lot of different things: health and safety of students, faculty, and staff, along with kind of immediate opening concerns, financial concerns, the concerns around your constituencies and local communities, so that it's a very complex environment that you're operating in. And just wanted to lay that groundwork, because otherwise I think our comments could come across as just being a little disconnected with some of the reality on the ground, whereas again, we're looking at it through a financial lens specifically. In addition to Mary Kay, as you noted, Chairman, we're joined by Kendra Smith, who is our Managing Director. She has extensive background across both not only higher education, but also healthcare and housing. And prior to that was on our corporate finance team, a senior member. So she has a lot of experience. Kendra, I don't know if you want to provide any opening comments as well.
No, I'd just like to say thank you, and it's quite a privilege and honor to be here, and we're appreciative of you giving us the invitation, so thank you.
Mm-hmm. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mary Kay to walk through the presentation.
Very good, thank you. So good morning, everybody, and yes, glad that we can be here with you virtually. I do have to just say, I'm actually kind of glad this is silver lining for me, because I broke my ankle hiking a few weeks ago. So this is a much better way for me to be presenting right now. So I'm going to be talking about, as Susan just said, we'll talk about some of the impacts to Kentucky, but really wanted to provide you this credit context, sort of on a national basis, if you will. So I'm just going to page this presentation and kind of give you a little bit of a setup here. And so I'll be talking about a high level background about our higher education portfolio. I'll talk about our higher education outlook, deeper dive into some of our key drivers for higher ed credit quality, and summarize some key takeaways. I have about 50 minutes or so, I believe. Hopefully we'll have time for questions. I'll try to keep an eye on any raised hands that show up on the screen. And so let's just go ahead and dive into this. So, again, this is sort of just for context here. This is the some detail about our portfolio of the credits that we rate. We have about 500 public universities and private universities. And I just wanted to start out by first saying that, from the standpoint of ratings, which is obviously something that we do, this chart shows the bell curve, or basically you can see that the public universities are the light blue bars, the private universities are the green bars, and public universities tend to have a median, a higher rating. The median is about a AA3 and privates is an A3. So, there's the disparity there, or the big difference lies in a couple of different things. The biggest, one of the most significant of which is that, public universities have some level of state support. And many of those states themselves are higher rated, AA, AAA states, that kind of thing. That's that range of ratings. Also, many of the public universities are large. They have multiple revenue streams, and they also have some economies of scale. So because of that, the ability to manage all this, to have the multiple revenue streams, more wealth, if you will, that the ratings tend to be higher, and then the privates, again, which have a median of A3. And as far as the debt portfolio that we rate, again, among our about 500 or so public and private universities, there's about $280 billion worth of outstanding debt that we rate. And again, the vast bulk of this debt is rated highly. So the top part of that chart shows the private universities. You've got the AAA and the AA, and that accounts for about 70% of private university debt. And interestingly, about 90% of public university debt is rated AA or higher. Again, this is due to the fact that many public institutions, large ones, they have, again, as I said, the multiple revenue streams, multiple areas of capital intensity, and housing, academic buildings, academic medical centers, and so there's credit strength from that perspective. So with that as the backdrop, the higher education sector, as Moody's looks at it, we had actually revised our higher education outlook to stable back in December. And so this was a quick change back in March to revise the outlook to negative once the coronavirus pandemic hit. And the rationale behind that really had to do with the uncertainties that we're being faced with that pivot, if you will, to all the different, to the new alignment of instructional delivery, et cetera. So, the outlook change was focused on, how revenue declines would be, how much they would be, whether there were expense increases associated with that. And again, I know I'm kind of in many ways speaking to the, talking to the choir, as the saying goes, because you all, either through your board leadership or as presidents, you all were dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, and we completely understand that. And going forward for fiscal year 21, back in March, there was so much uncertainty again, thinking about, how would tuition be impacted? Would students be coming? What kind of changes in state funding would there be? Endowment income, would the market be affected by this? So again, there were a lot of uncertainty, which, again, was the backdrop for the revision to negative. And then last, thinking about balance sheets. And when we talk about balance sheets, we're talking about, the cash and investments and liquidity, and would universities have to rely on their liquidity or on their wealth to balance operations? And again, this also kind of brings into play long-term pension liabilities as well. So, and all of this leading to, the potential for a significant loss of financial flexibility. And the chart to the right there just kind of shows that, where some of the issues are here. So, the green bars are public, the blue bars are private, and many of the U.S. universities already have operating deficits, so about 30% of public universities. And so, what we're kind of thinking here, again, in addition to the next bar over there about the percentage of universities that have less than 90 days cash on hand, 90 days meaning about 3 months of liquidity, so 3 months to cover operations, should there be a complete shutdown of revenue. So there's really the focus on how universities across the spectrum would be able to deal with this upcoming uncertainty. One thing that I just want to make a quick note on about this is that, it has been really remarkable how universities have responded during fiscal 20 and how resilient so many have been, from the strong to even some of the weaker ones, and the strategies that have been put into play. And so, right now, the way we're looking at 20 is many of the universities are going to have balanced operations, and the real kind of the threats really are in this 2021 timeframe. And so what I wanted to do as we, kind of move forward is, first I want to talk about, go to the next slide here, talk about the underlying factors, for this sector. And then I'm going to kind of step back and talk about various, deep dives we've taken on some of the various revenue items that part of the revenue diversity for higher education. So, and again, I'm probably going to be saying things that many of you are already very, very aware of, and that is, for this sector, what are some of the inherent strengths and the underlying challenges? And the strengths have been for so long, the return on investment that a college degree or an advanced degree provides in terms of jobs and income. There has been commentary that many of the jobs lost in this in the most recent, as the pandemic ensued, have been those without college educations. Higher education also benefits from its public good. In providing research and health and education for its state, or it's the residents of its state, or the residents from other states as well. There's multiple vested constituents interested in higher ed. So you have your alumni, government, local communities, and the philanthropic support that comes from these various constituencies, alumni, and other research-oriented foundations, for example. And and the other thing that's really positive for higher education is how long-term planning has helped, and the long-term horizon of so many institutions in the accumulation of cash and reserves. And so, providing a good financial flexibility for institutions to make changes. And speaking of changes, universities have been adaptable to changing consumer preferences over time. And certainly, as we'll see, they are certainly doing this right now as well. But, again, with strengths, there are offsetting challenges, and the challenges will be more exacerbated here as we kind of run through, the kind of the continuing, as we kind of work through the hopefully at some point an end to the coronavirus pandemic. But so there's been limits on pricing power for universities, and for the students and families, less willingness to take on student loans. And this has been something that we have talked about in Kentucky before as well. Shifting demographics, declining numbers of students in many states. Some states are doing well, and then there's kind of a lot of enrollment strategies going on at various institutions to try to work on bringing in some of these non-resident students. There's been an ongoing focus on accountability, that scrutiny of the return on investment for students and their jobs, in terms of the cost of education. And then some of the other you think about rigid labor force, that refers to as we know, about 2/3 of expense base is tied to wages and salary. And so now there's some of the issues that are faced with tenure and unions, and there's been some even now some universities are facing unionization of some of their faculty, as they respond to how the universities are responding. And then just the comment about ability to respond, shared governance structure, and how difficult it can be to sometimes make changes. Although, as we have seen these last few months, there have been a number of changes that have been made quite fast. So this chart is really just to kind of talk again about the prolonged period of flat enrollment across the nation. And again, this is something that Kentucky is quite acutely aware of. And so I just, we'll, for the sake of time, we'll move forward on this. So let's think about, I really kind of want to spend more time talking about, 2020 and 2021. So as we just talked about, or as I just mentioned, 2020, many universities were able to quickly make some very significant changes. So immediate reduction of labor costs, the CARES, and then the CARES Act also helped to provide some funding for offsets for, for their students, some use of funds for added expenses during that had to be implemented in this pivot to online learning. And what we've also seen is some universities have bolstered their liquidity, either by scaling back with capital. Many have taken out some new lines. Some of the larger universities in particular increased their access to lines of credit, or actually took capital on their balance sheet. And so as we think about going forward to 2021, and again, these are all questions that you all continue to address and talk about every single day. Campuses open or closed? Is enrollment going to be up or down? State funding, how much will that change by? Is there a discussion about additional federal relief? That hasn't happened yet, and I think many are still hoping, but I don't think there's any sort of widespread panacea expected there. Will there be permanent cost reductions going forward? And then what's the impact on endowment, reserves, pensions, especially in light of a relatively flat return for fiscal 2020. And last, litigation issues. And this refers to some of the class action suits by students who believe that they did not get kind of the return on investment that they expected. Pardon me for just a second.
Yeah, and I think we're looking also more broadly at litigation now beyond that, really, as there's concern around health and safety, bringing students back, and potentially even faculty litigation. So, I think this is a thing that we have our eyes on moving forward, and see as a broader risk on the horizon, and another challenge as administrations are dealing with just the process of reopening.
So I wanted to, at this point for the next couple of slides, kind of think about some of the impacts or potential impacts to key revenue streams. And so in this case, we're talking about student charges. And again, some of these pieces that or some of the slides I'll be working through the next, upcoming here. In the back of this presentation, there's research, and I believe maybe some of this research was, these research reports were provided to you in advance of this meeting today. So, and this is research from one of those, and it's actually quite interesting, and that is, we've kind of seen this before, where there's when there's an increase in unemployment, there tends to be an increase in enrollment, and as one of our colleagues says, there's a good potential for an increase in customers for higher education. And so the line here is the fall, so basically Q3 unemployment, and then we have the annual change in FTE students from over this last kind of 2 decades or so. And as we can see, the unemployment was falling. There was kind of a decline in enrollment, and now with with unemployment up, there is a good potential for students maybe coming back to campus or coming back to school in obviously many different ways. And so I think I looked up the August unemployment was 8.4%. So we're kind of still in this, very, very high unemployment rate relative to what has been historically. And so I'm going to go to this next slide here and talk about, we take that forward. The one item that's kind of coming out of this particular research and what we're seeing going forward is, while there may be more students for fall 2020, those students won't be able to pay, or will likely be unable to pay at the same kinds of levels that were, say, in the prior decade. And we spend a little more time kind of deep diving on, what the particular impacts could be. So I'm sorry, hold on one second.
Yeah, why don't I continue on while you take a sip, Mary Kay? So kind of long story short, what we were predicting with our research was, while enrollment might increase, there would be a shift in students to lower cost alternatives, maybe a shift from private to public, from four-year public to some of the community colleges, maybe a shift from full-time to part-time, and then certainly a real pressure on tuition discounting and financial aid. So we were, despite potential enrollment increases, predicting a potential decrease in net tuition revenue. And it's interesting because CPI for tuition just was released, and it was the lowest level, I think, in 40 years. It just came out yesterday. So I think some of that is bearing fruit in terms of institutions rolling back tuition increases, freezing tuition, some of those constraints that were already there in terms of affordability really coming home this year. And I don't think we think this is a one year thing. I think these issues around affordability are here for the foreseeable future and will limit the growth of tuition revenue for the foreseeable future. And that's going to be a real credit challenge, irrespective of what happens with enrollment.
And to just kind of add on to that, and looking at the the comments in the lower left-hand side of the slide there. So thinking about the drivers for net change, net price change. Again, students may be gravitating to lower cost options. Some schools, the international students have not been able to. Some international students were able to stay in the country. Some have not been able to come back. And that's been an important portion of student body in terms of tuition revenue. They tend to pay full price. And, I think, just kind of jumping ahead here, they're with fewer students potentially on campus, if they're looking at multiple modalities, there's potential softening demand for auxiliary services. And I'll have a couple of slides on that. We'll talk about auxiliary housing. So again, some pressure on student tuition revenue and pricing flexibility going forward. I want to just step back for a second here and talk about state support, since that's another important revenue stream. And going into fiscal 2020, state support was up, even for Kentucky, for most states, for pretty much all states actually. But obviously, this is going to be changing dramatically over the next couple of years. Kentucky certainly knows what's happening here. We got my understanding is correct, 1% cut for the rest of fiscal year 20, and then 2021 as well. And again, this is true for many states, and some it's interesting kind of watching how the budgets are unfolding. Some there could be some change in the state appropriation later in the year, depending on how the state budget rolls out. So that's, again, another important revenue source for our state institutions. So back to thinking about the transformation of, back to, just make sure, for modalities. One of our colleagues did a piece, and again, you have access to this research on talking about technology and how that is transforming higher education. And so the statistics, have borne out that, there are fewer students on campus, looking at the chart on the left, from fall 2018. More students are moving online, either exclusively or completely online. And, I think the importance of this is going to remain, the importance of the transformation to, more online learning efforts. it's important. It's an important option for traditional age students. But in the meantime, for right now, the technology has really been key for helping with social distancing. It's been a very costly investment. There have been, whether a university is diving into online, whether it has started already or is maybe building it out. We've seen some universities who are working with larger secondary institutions. So, for example, the most recent University of Arizona with Ashford, University of Massachusetts with Chapman University's Brandmond. So those are kind of the big scale ones. But nevertheless, that the online really has been providing a unique opportunity to bring in different kinds of programs. So either large scale programs or stackable degrees. So this is again, this is not without cost. And so that's kind of part of the conversation here as well.
And I'll just layer on top of that, part of what we're paying attention to as well is a whole digital divide, right? Not everybody has access to the same level of broadband. Not everyone can easily pivot to online. Beyond that, not all students can learn online. So real questions around short term, what does this mean for student retention, student success rates? What's happening with K through 12 education now mean longer term for student preparedness for college and potential future needs for remediation? So I think all of these slides that we're looking at, there's kind of the immediate what's happening this year as in 2021, but all of these have longer term ramifications. And I'll just layer on to what Mary Kay said on this prior slide, state funding. Our states team is really not expecting much economic growth to resume back to 2019 levels until maybe 2023, 2024 in some cases. So multi-year, low to declining state funding, lots of different competing priorities. And then, Mary Kay, and then kind of really a fundamental transformation of how students are learning, but with real issues around equity and access and success that are going to be critical for higher education going forward.
So we've been talking about the tuition revenue. We've talked about state support. And so let's kind of move a little bit into a little touch on auxiliaries, and the importance here will become evident. So this slide actually just points out that among the housing mix among institutions, and for private institutions, about 55% of students live on campus. For public, about 30% live on campus. And I think what I'd like to just make sure we kind of move into is this conversation about auxiliary revenues and the impact on those from potentially, due to social distancing protocols and taking, for example, for housing at least anyway, social distancing protocols and taking some residence halls offline for quarantine. So maybe not making the kind of revenue that they had been, and again, this particular study, and again, this is another research report that we have provided you with, focused on auxiliary revenue, housing, parking, athletic, multiple auxiliaries again that as a university is managing around them would hope to be self-supporting. And so we did this particular slide is actually just addressing how we looked at some 2019 data, and among the institutions that we looked at, about 65% of them or so, a little over 65%, the auxiliaries, again, as we looked at it, knowing that there could be some difference in allocations when we're looking at audited data, but 65% of the auxiliary revenue versus expenses were break even or profitable. And so, thinking about the impact to 2021 and further, if there is the less in terms of these key auxiliary revenues, what happens when you stress these scenarios? And so, you can see on the slide there the revenue down 25%, and then there's some appropriate expenses down based on the fact that some expenses are probably fixed costs. So, kind of the bottom line from this slide, though, is that that we're seeing that auxiliaries are likely to be very highly pressured in 2021 at the very least. And so we can't talk about challenges without talking about pension burdens as well. So pension burdens, pensions themselves, they remain an outstanding consideration. They have liabilities have actually pensions themselves are, I wouldn't say they're not a top priority at the moment. They've kind of moved to the back burner based on other items that remain a key focus. But in Kentucky, you all are acutely aware of the pension burdens. And then this is another research piece that was done recently. And just, again, this was looking at our complete sector of public universities that have pension burdens. And it's interesting that, Kentucky universities are in good company. Over half of rated universities have pensions. And these are pensions, as Moody's calculated, that exceed their direct debt. And that's the chart on the left. And then the chart on the right that shows the various states, which states have more pension liability pressure. This is from the standpoint of pension assets being funded or not funded, if you will. The other thing that came out of this, or that we think about here, and again, this is for Kentucky in particular, is that pension, we think about pension contributions, and this has been something that the institutions in Kentucky have been focused on for several years. I know any decisions have been pushed out a year in terms of, plan, opting in, opting out, et cetera. But, one thing that does stand out about Kentucky is the median pension contribution as a percent of operating expenses for public universities is about 2.2%. And in Kentucky, when I look at each of the universities, that 2.2% translates to the universities here to a range of more than double that, 4.6% to about almost 7%. So pension burden remains a very important part of the conversation in Kentucky.
And I think important because it limits the kind of potential crowding out issue, right? If more money is being put to pensions, that means that there are less resources available for investment in infrastructure, academic programming, and student success initiatives. So promises of the past impairing the ability to invest in the future.
I wanted to make sure we point out the importance of liquidity. And this is something that whenever as a lead analyst, we have, I have calls with universities. You're always going to get the question of what are you looking at as your liquidity for 20? What do you look as your liquidity for going forward into 2021? So, that the ability to have some reserves to manage through this period of financial uncertainty is really critical. And this chart's kind of interesting, just looking at how public universities in general have lower liquidity relative to than their private college counterparts. But again, just pointing out again the importance of this particular metric as we think about financial sustainability going forward. So I'm kind of moving towards the last part of my slides here, and I wanted to wrap up with a couple of things. And one is just talk about recent credit actions that have happened kind of post coronavirus, and also some takeaways of what we've seen and what we think about going forward. So, these are actions, and I think really the one takeaway here is that, the recent actions we've taken have stemmed from underlying weaknesses that some of these institutions have had. And so, this is Western Washington University. We just recently revised the outlook to negative from stable. And, this was something that there was already underlying weak operating performance driven by, tuition and some pricing flexibility issues. And it was exacerbated in this fall 2020 due to a 10% decline in enrollment and related declines in tuition, auxiliary, and fee revenue as projected going forward. And Fort Lewis College is just a small college in Colorado. Again, they've had ongoing market challenges. They were under, they did have a negative review, or excuse me, a negative outlook on them, but given state appropriation cuts of roughly 5% and what's expected to be continuing challenges into 21 was downgraded to A3. And I'll let Susan finish the last one.
Yeah, and contrary to that, in Alabama State, we actually revised our outlook back to stable from negative. This is a historically Black university in Alabama, and they actually are benefiting from the CARES Act funding, and for some ability, they have a lot of loans through the Department of Education to defer principal and interest. So they are bolstering their liquidity in part because of federal support. But I think kind of the bigger takeaway is you've heard us talk about a number of the pressures across the sector. We haven't been taking blanket rating actions. We haven't been doing a lot of downgrades. Some of the negative outlooks are accelerating, but what we're really trying to do is see through the cycle. Our ratings are meant to be long-term and speak to long-term flexibility. So we're taking an approach of talking with every institution, understanding their unique impacts and kind of their offsetting mitigancy actions that they're taking. So pressure, but not a wholesale downgrade of individual institutions or even necessarily the outlooks. And we've had more affirmations with stable outlooks actually than changes to negative outlooks or downward rating actions because of some of that resiliency that Mary Kay mentioned previously.
So if we think about kind of going forward here, I think we have some time for questions and answers, but I wanted to just wrap up with a couple of things. And I imagine many are thinking about those quotes, never waste a good crisis. Whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And, and that's the one thing that we've been seeing among many institutions is they really have, leadership teams have responded so rapidly. And, in the multiple conversations that I've had, it's really, one of the things that I find the most helpful and the most valuable is to think about leadership teams. They don't have the answers, but they do provide multiple scenarios, multiple planning scenarios, the what-if scenarios. So they're thinking about all the possibilities, and it's very impressive. They're building in contingencies, and universities have had there continues to be this liquidity focus, as I just pointed out how important that is, and then also debt strategies have been an important part of the conversation. Among how to manage expenses. And that's, we're certainly happy to talk more about that, but, thinking about how some institutions have lightened the load, if you will, for debt service in 2021, doing what they call kind of a scoop and toss and moving it out in later years. And we'll come back to address that again, but, some in ways to lessen the load for expense management going forward. And as Susan just said, there's just been incredible resiliency of institutions. And so kind of the overall credit impacts here is, what we've been saying and along with what Susan's been saying is that, those institutions with credit strength have been doing pretty well and are likely going to be fine. And again, speaking to the point of not making any real broad stroked actions across the portfolio, the weaker credits are doing okay and being very responsive. And as Susan just said, we're not expecting a massive fallout right now. So, and I think there's one thing, again, you have to kind of take away, are there some silver linings here? And I'm kind of drawing from a conversation that Susan had recently with one of my colleagues. And overall, the higher ed sector is becoming much more agile. And there's more focus on customer needs. And the universities are strengthening their risk management strategies. So some real important takeaways, something for universities to be proud of as they've kind of moving through this particular very challenging time period. Yeah. So Susan, if you want to add to that.
No, I think that's right. Again, looking at it through the credit lens, the very difficult decisions that again have some human costs that colleges and universities are making, are preserving credit quality. And to the extent that governing boards and institutions are approaching these decisions with a strategic lens rather than a reactionary lens, I think have prospects, as Mary Kay said, of ultimately strengthening the sector and strengthening institutions, although after a period of just a lot of turmoil and difficulty. And with that, shall we open it up for any questions that might have come through?
Thank you, Heather. Have you been keeping a tally on questions?
I've been keeping an eye out and I have not seen any submitted. So if you want to just open it up verbally, see President Jackson with his hand up.
Okay, sure. President Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to ask a question. So this is Bob Jackson, Susan, Mary Kay, and President of Murray State. As you all know, in regard to pensions, if we could go back there just a second, on or before year end, we'll have the decision to make for many of our public institutions to buy ourselves out of the pension systems, possibly through going to the debt markets or financing through our pension system. What do you anticipate the rating hit to be if one were to take on $100 to $200 million of additional debt, depending on the institution, number one? And what type of future impairment would you anticipate for the next 20 to 30 years in regard to new additional debt offerings? Obviously, there's some calculus that you've looked at in regard to this, and I'd be very interested in hearing your comments.
I think first off, anytime any new debt issuance would be kind of case by case. And, in that situation, we have talked about that, how would that impact, and I think the devil is in the details on that in terms of how that particular financing would be set up. What were the offsetting mitigating costs? Would there be a credit impact? There is a credit impact. Would it affect the rating? That's something that we really wouldn't be able to say at this moment. It would be based on, underlying operations of the institution, what's the plan for paying for that debt, those kinds of questions that would come into play. But, it is something that we have been thinking about along with you as you've been, wondering about how or trying to see how this is going to play out. My understanding was that there were kind of multiple different scenario possibilities. It wasn't just an all or none. There's the soft, the hard, there's installments. And so I think it seems to me it's a very complicated decision. And how when you go through those details of what to do exactly, and whether the system, how the system will allow the financing of that, or how it would be financed, would weigh into the ultimate impact to credit rating.
Mm-hmm. But I would also say that we're already looking at those pension liabilities within our total adjusted debt metrics. We're looking at it as a liability of the institution. So it's really trading one form of a liability for another form of a liability, but fundamentally doesn't change the underlying, if you will, economics of the fact that that's a liability that's owed and will have to be dealt with one way or the other.
Yeah, especially when you think about the the one statistic about how high the expenses are, the pension contribution expenses for the Kentucky universities on average, compared to the median. So as I said, it was the median across the US for all institutions that have pension liabilities. The contributions are about 2.2% of operating expenses, whereas in Kentucky they're, as I said, double, 4.6 to almost 7%. So again, the math may be all part of the calculus of how that impacts the credit.
I just had a question come in from a council member. They've asked if you could advise where Kentucky stands in relation to other states as to state funding support. They said slide 12. Like, is there a ranking for state support?
Yeah, interesting. I just was looking at this data. The Grapevine data is actually available. Excuse me. It's available to, I think, anybody. And I was just looking at this morning, as a matter of fact. And so, but bottom line is, relative to other states, Kentucky is among the lowest. You know, it's not a particularly generous state for its higher ed institutions, and you know, has not been for many years. So I don't. It's too bad I don't have like a good chart to show that, but it is among the lowest in terms of you know, per capita. I think one measure that was interesting was state appropriations for higher education per capita was the number I saw, and it was really quite low.
Hey,
You know, and
Ben,
yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Ben Brandstetter?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Bill Payne. Actually, Sean McKiernan and Ryan Kaffenberger and I were looking at the data from the Chef Finance Survey just last week, and Ryan was ranking where Kentucky was in relation to the 16 SREB states, not only relative to state support per student, but also net tuition and fee revenue. And whereas Kentucky about a decade ago ranked probably about 4th best funded among the 16 SREB states on that metric, we've dropped down to where we're very close to average or slightly below average. So this decade of funding cuts almost every year has moved Kentucky down the rankings to where we're right about average in terms of state support per FTE. And at the same time, of course, the council's been implementing tuition ceilings, which have capped the amount of tuition and fee revenue that institutions can generate in any given year. And so we've moved down the rankings on that metric as well. But basically, we're right about average in funding per FTE in total public funds compared to the SREB states.
Heather, what else do you have on your list?
I do not have anything else on my list.
Okay.
Chair Brandstetter, I'm trying to raise my hand. I'm not doing a very good job of it. I apologize. I need to figure out where the raise hand button is at on my screen, but I can't find it. Mary Kay, looking at this chart, I guess I'd like for you to also explain the difference between direct appropriations of dollars, state dollars to campuses versus the appropriations to the financial aid system. So that's, I mean, if you look at this percent or this bar, it's up a little bit, which is a little bit of a misnomer if you're not exactly sure how the money is distributed to higher ed, I guess. All right, so would you mind explaining that?
If I understand your question, you're asking about the difference between state appropriations and state support for financial aid?
Which this bar indicates actually both of those would be my guess.
Would include
it just
both
doesn't
of those.
indicate, because some of the times we get lost in state appropriations to campuses to do their operations versus the dollars they give to students to take it wherever they want to take it, I guess.
Susan, do you want to field that one?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And again, there are a lot of unique things across each of these states that would influence that. It's a combination of all of those things, plus funding for pension and OPEBs in some cases, right? And so it's a question of where those state dollars are being allocated. Colorado is another example, Mary Kay, which has a very unique kind of fund. Mary Kay is also the lead analyst for Colorado, where there's very kind of little direct state support for institutions, but a lot of state funding that follows the students under the college opportunity. This really, you're right, it hides some of the nuances of how the dollars are flowing into where the dollars are flowing.
Yeah, if you look at this, I just wanted to point out to the council members that don't understand fully how those dollars flow. I mean, Kentucky is a fairly high aid state to the students, where if you were looking at just the direct appropriations to the campuses, that bar would be going down versus the bar now looks like it's up a little bit. That's because of the state aid that has been put in from the lottery funds I'm not saying it's still not state aid, it really is, but it follows the student versus direct appropriation to the campus.
Thank you, President Thompson. Mary Kay and Susan, I've got one question that I'll insert. As you guys are looking at the overall landscape, what is you're looking at the institutions that are their rating is going up, and I don't know how many are actually going up versus going down, but it may be tough to do at this point in time. But the ones that are going up, what are you guys seeing as those triggers for what I consider to be success? And if success is a higher rated entity, is it student growth? Is it controlling expenses? I mean, is it state funding? What are you seeing is there any common theme around that you guys are seeing on a national basis?
Yeah, I think from the standpoint of seeing, upgrades are definitely not happening as nearly as frequently as they have in the past. But I think maybe the one thing to maybe sort of circle around here is what do we see as kind of the strengths of an institution, and how it bolsters itself, and going forward. I think that's kind of, especially in these times, perhaps more likely. And it's really all about managing the enrollment growth, absolutely, but enrollment growth by itself is not the key measure. It's really about net tuition per student growth. That growth, it's also managing expenses, and it's also being able to manage liquidity. So a number of items that point to the improvement of a university. It takes a long time to kind of build those things as well. Susan, I see you looking like you want to.
I will say that really since the last recession, 2008, 2009, across the higher education sector, downgrades have exceeded upgrades. So while there have been some upgrades, I would say that this is not necessarily a sector where we see many institutions improving their credit quality. It's a sector that I think has some, as Mary Kay pointed out, fundamental strengths, but some fundamental challenges, and is really at kind of an inflection point. But our methodology does include something called strategic positioning, and that's really what I would point to. And the kind of quick way I would summarize strategic positioning would be, does an institution have a really clear-eyed sense of its environment, kind of both the macro environment for higher education and the individual environment that it's operating in? Is it able to make decisions to position itself in that environment? So that's it could be kind of in part changing mission, which is hard for an institution, or changing academic programs, but is it on a regular basis able to reassess what the market wants, what its role is, and implement those changes? And then does it have the resources to do so? And resources can come from, that's a very broad definition. You could have like a locational endowment. Are you in a recently urban location where students want to study, so you have a way of attracting students? Or do you have a unique niche that attracts students? Or are you in a state that provides more state funding? Or are you able to do fundraising? So resources is really broadly defined, but do you know what your environment is, who you are you able to adapt who you are, and do you have the resources to make the change? And the ones that are have been upgraded, I think, have done a very good job of all of that.
I think on top of that too is just for those particular changes is benchmarking and assessment of themselves, on a frequent basis, so that they are able to pivot if they realize they're not making inroads on whatever their plans are. said that would be adversely impact them financially or reputationally.
Mhm. So to Mary Kay's point, or much earlier in the conversation, again, I think higher ed has a reputation of not changing, and I don't think that's the case. I think it changes quite a bit. It's historically sometimes been a little bit slower to change, and from our perspective, the pace of change is increasing. So part of what is going to make institutions successful going forward is likely to be their ability to adapt to a pace of very rapid change. And I will say one of the things that has been so interesting from kind of an external observer perspective for the sector, again, is how rapidly some institutions were able to make some very tough decisions and pivot as a part of this crisis much more rapidly than we would have, I think, previously anticipated. So I think that's a positive indicator around kind of risk management and positioning going forward.
All right. Mary Kay, Susan, Kendra, thank you very much for your time today, your time over the course of the last couple of months preparing for this discussion. It's great to see you again, and we look forward to having you back when the time is right. Thank you to everybody who asked questions. I think we touched on a wide variety of topics. Yes.
Ben, I'm sorry, it's Kim. I did raise my hand. I don't know if the raise hand function's not working or not, but and you know, absolutely fine, and appreciate the data from Moody's. But I guess that I have sort of more of a challenge question for my fellow board members, and I apologize for those of you that this is your first meeting, but I would ask the question of, this is the second time in the past 3 years that we've heard this report and seen the data from Moody's that doesn't promote an optimistic picture of what education looks like in the state of Kentucky. I do think having the comparative analytics to other states is nice, but I'm not sure that thinking that the state is going to come to our rescue for additional funding at this point is a reasonable course for us to pursue, given all of the other dynamics. And I guess I challenge us as a board to say, what are we doing about this? What is our call to action? And what are the things that we can influence and trigger to try to change the outcome for the future? Because I think those action items, to have these reports and have the data is nice, but without a call to action of our board, it doesn't feel like it's really meaningful to just paint a pessimistic picture that we're not doing or making progress on. And if we are making progress, how do we celebrate that progress and continue that as we move forward?
All right. Thank you, Kim. And I think that's something we all need to be taking into consideration over the course of the next few months, and especially as we revamp our strategic agenda, looking ahead to 2030 as well. Mary Kay, Susan, Kendra, again, thank you for your time, and we appreciate you being here and appreciate your all's insight. Dr. Babar was here with us for a few minutes. Heather, is he still with us? I can't.
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Oh, there he is. Got it. Dr. Babar is our our fourth new member to join us today, in addition to our student representative. And I did want to give you a chance to introduce yourself for a couple minutes. We will have to do your oath of office at our subsequent meeting, and I believe you may have some other appointments. You're just going to be with us for a few minutes today, but Dr. Babar, if you could take a couple minutes and introduce yourself and tell us what your background is.
Sure. First of all, it's an honor to be serving on this board with you all, and I'm hoping to learn more about our education system because I was born in Pakistan. I moved to US 25 years ago. I was product of public education system in my land of birth. I did my training in internal medicine at State University of New York in Buffalo. Then I moved to Louisville in 2004. I did a fellowship in geriatric medicine here at UFL, and I also did Master of Science in Public Health. I'm also board certified in palliative medicine, and then later on I did MBA from University of Massachusetts at Amherst. I have twin boys, Adam and Harris. They just started 8th grade, and so far I have fulfilled my commitment to have them in public education. Here they go to JCPS. My wife, she is master's in criminal justice. I have my own private practice, but then I'm part-time working as a hospitalist at St. Mary of Elizabeth Hospital, which had change of hands over the years. And in this past December, University of Louisville bought the hospital. So there is one thing that which I want to make sure that you guys also guide me, that if ever there is any voting where the University of Louisville is involved, I would like to recluse myself from that. I have 2 nonprofit organizations. One is Muslim Americans for Compassion, which focus on interfaith work. But my second nonprofit is Doctors for Healthy Communities. We closely work with 6 JCPS schools, and we support those schools from health education, school back to school supplies, to blessings in backpacks. So whatever need we can help them, we support them. This organization, during this COVID-19 pandemic, it really it supported our communities in Eastern Kentucky and in Western Kentucky with help of over 30 state legislators from across the aisle, and we distributed 20,000 KN95 masks to the clinics, health communities in I think it's probably around 30 to 40 counties in our Commonwealth. Currently, I also want to apologize from President Thompson that yesterday was a very busy day for me. I have 3 COVID-19 units which I'm managing here in Louisville, and I was so tired in the evening that I did not check my messages up until 9:30 this morning, and that's when I got his message. Then I went to my email and got the Zoom link and joined the meeting. It is, I'm hoping to learn and try to see that because educational system in our country, which is foundation like any other nation, but it's so expensive, and you keep on hearing that from across the political aisle, different solutions to it. But I believe that our educational system is still the best in the world, because I have to admit that the first time I thought that when I used my God-given brain in an exam was when I took the United States medical licensing exams. Prior to that, in my educational system, in my land of birth, that my mind was not provoked. And here, when I discuss with my 13-year-old kids, and the way they ask the thought-provoking questions, that tells me the success, that why our nation still has the Nobel Prizes and all the innovation which are coming from that. But having said that, I am curious to see that how can we assist our coming generations that with this rapidly increasing cost in education, because it is not easy for a person of no privilege to send their kids to college, and we are working on. I'm a Rotary Club member in Louisville. We have Rotary Promise Education Fund, where we are trying to support. We have 2 high school in involvement with JCTC that they're getting 2 years there, and then they can get at University of Louisville for. But I think this is my passion, that how I can understand that and how can I be part of it. So I am, as a new member, and also being a doctor of medicine, which I think probably I have the least knowledge, but I will be an engaged board member and will learn from you guys and try to contribute my little input. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Babar. Thanks for joining us today. And I would like to take about a 5-minute break on the Zoom call and then resume. And we have a handful of items, including the Finance Committee report and a couple other reports, and then we'll be done for the day. So if we could, my clock says 10:30 on the dot. If we could come back at 10:35, that would be fantastic. Thank you. All right, welcome back. Trust everybody will get back and turn their video on here in a second. While we come back, I would like to ask President Thompson to introduce Rob Akers, who I see his name down on my screen, to provide a report from Kentucky Department of Education.
Thank you, Chair Brandstetter. Rob, good to see you. Rob and I have known each other from the days when he was principal at Woodford County. I had to think for a second, Rob. I'm going way back. Rob and I work together. I serve on the EPSB board, and Rob was the appointed member of EPSB when I first got to know him well. And then later on, when EPSB moved under KDE, Rob actually retired, I think, if I'm correct, from Woodford County and became an associate commissioner. And he'll give you his title here in a second, but Rob basically leads the efforts that we have in licensing our campuses, as well as overseeing teacher education from the standpoint of teachers who are already certified mainly, but also our departments and colleges to make sure that they're doing the things they need to do. So CPE, just to put it in perspective, we are the folks that truly control the programs that through the appointment as well as review on our campuses. Then Rob can come in and look at our teacher ed programs to see if they're doing all the things they need to do, in fact, to be a part of the education system, K-12 education system, make sure the teachers have the kind of requirements they need. So that's a quick introduction, Rob. You may want to add more, but he's sitting instead, I think, of Jason, and look forward to hearing your report, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson, Chair Brandstetter, Dr. Thompson, members of the board. It's good to be with you today, and thank you for the introduction. I'm happy to be here. This is my first time at one of these meetings, so it's been very interesting to listen to the workings of this board. Very clearly, there's a lot going on, and appreciate your good work with that. As Dr. Thompson said, my name is Rob Akers, and I am an associate commissioner at KDE in the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. And as he said, we do manage the work of the EPSB board. We execute that work, and we staff their initiatives for them. They are still an independent board, even though the EPSB, the agency, was abolished and reorganized into the Kentucky Department of Education. And so when I stepped aside from my role as chair of the board, I was appointed as associate commissioner to oversee that work and work very closely with one of Dr. Thompson's associate vice presidents now, Amanda Ellis, who works at CPA, and with Dr. Melissa Bell as well. So it's good to be with you today. Also, I'm a proud parent of a current Murray racer. So Dr. Jackson, thank you for all your efforts to get her out of my house. I've never had seen a student in all my 28 years of education more excited to go back to school after a 6-month spring break. So we're very grateful to have her back on your campus and hopefully following all of the racer rules for being safe. And if she's not, you just let me know. It's been a big week already at the Kentucky Department of Education. You did get to meet Dr. Glass just for a second on his second day of official work on the job. He has been reporting to Sauer for the last 2 weeks in transition, working with Kevin Brown, our outgoing commissioner, who just from a personal standpoint did a phenomenal job when he took the job as interim and came in to just put a steady hand on the tiller. I don't think he was expecting 8 months of helping to try to navigate the Kentucky Public Schools through this COVID emergency, and I think he did a masterful job with that. I know Dr. Thompson got to work closely with him on the Kentucky Board of Education, and so just wanted to share my personal appreciation for that. I think what you'll find with Dr. Glass is that he is highly engaged, very sharp, very well-rounded in terms of his real-world experiences at the district, at the state level, and even at the national level. And I think he'll be an excellent addition to this board. I'm happy to fill in at any time for him. I know that he's going to be a very busy man, and look forward to any way that I can help support the work in between as well. With that, here's a quick high level of what's going on at KDE. The public schools are dealing with much of the same things that you are in terms of trying to bring students and staff safely back onto campus. Clearly, that's been a huge lift, and we know that while our protocols are a little different, I would imagine many of the processes and trying to navigate what's safe and what's necessary to have a real college experience as well on campus, that tension's probably been very real for you, and we appreciate all those efforts. The EPSB met for the first time a couple of weeks ago with a brand new board. As part of the reorganization that has not been codified yet, there's as a result, there is a new reorg or executive order that's given out each year. One thing that I'm really glad to see in this latest reorganization is a greater presence of higher education on the EPSB, something that we advocated for, and appreciate the Lieutenant Governor and Governor listening on that. Prior to the reorganization, we had 21 members, 2 of which were voting members from higher education. We're down to 17 members. We now have 4 voting members that are representative of higher education, including CPE being given, while still an ex officio position, they do have a vote. You do have a vote again. And Dr. Amanda Ellis, who has worked closely with the board over the years, is serving currently as Dr. Thompson's designee on the board with that. So just to give you an update on that. So just a couple of other things from the agency. Schools are returning to in-person instruction, and that we've seen roughly about 50 districts go back out of the 171 that we have. Just like you, they're trying to navigate social distancing and healthy at school protocols and athletics and transportation, many of the logistical challenges that you're working with as well. One thing of note, the Department of Public Health just produced yesterday, with a lot of collaboration from the Kentucky Department of Education, a color-coded system for being able to make informed decisions on whether to be in school or not, or any variation in between. I do believe that'll probably be beneficial to our folks who are working at our state institutions as well, as that'll give you kind of that, at least an idea of what's going on in terms of local education. This is patterned a little bit off of what West Virginia produced about a month ago. I think it's going to be an important tool for our districts. Our superintendents have been very passionate in their advocacy for being able to make local decisions on when to be in school and when not. And I think that this gives them that ability to have something to hang their hat on, when in one portion of the state, clearly they may have few to no cases versus other areas where they may be in hotspots. So that is something I think that'll be interesting to see play out. And I think that gives, like I said, the local school boards and superintendents the resources that they need to be able to make really good decisions for their school districts. KDE has been working ad nauseum and putting out guidance documents. I think we have about 18 or 19 of them so far that are out there. So that's probably no different than what you all have been doing as well in terms of developing guidance. But as you know, with our institutions or with our districts having a lot of local control, we just try to put out the guidelines for them so that they can try to operate in the best way possible to make best decisions that they can. The KBE, the Kentucky Board of Education, is welcoming Dr. Randy Poe, former superintendent from Boone County, longtime Kentucky educator, to the board. He is filling the vacancy that was left when Dave Karam left the board. So the board is full now, and they will continue with the business that they're doing and whatever new paths they're taking under Dr. Glass's leadership. In addition, and I know that at least reading some of the correspondence that comes across my email, the Kentucky Department of Education is trying to help school districts with resources around social emotional health for our students who are participating remotely or who are dealing with other trauma coming back. I know that's something that our colleges and universities are focused on as well. Mental health is a big concern of our students and our staff. And if you are so interested, we do have some strong resources that have been compiled to support our districts out there. From my office, one of the things we sponsor is the Go Teach KY initiative. And it's a program that very few states operate it from the state level. And so just in a quick overview, the goal is to try to help recruit teachers to elevate the profession, to make students and prospective teaching candidates aware of the opportunities for entering the field. I think that to bring back the statement that was made earlier, never let a good crisis go to waste. Economic downturns are usually really good for colleges of education, and our enrollments are up this year across the board. Oftentimes, teaching positions are seen as a little more secure, and sometimes that brings candidates back to those types of positions. We saw a similar thing after 2008, all the way through about 12, but we've been in a pretty sharp decline in teacher shortage since then. So we're hoping that our efforts around this project will bear fruit. In addition to that, I'm really delighted that Dr. Thompson hired Dr. Amanda Ellis to serve as a bridge between the K-12 world and the higher ed world. She understands both sides of those issues. Amanda and I work very closely together. It's funny, we've probably had more meetings together now that she's been at CPE than when she was my boss over at KDE. So there's been very little ramp up time. We're both learning about each other's roles so that we can better support what college or post-secondary readiness looks like in our K-12 kids, and then being able to really leverage teacher preparation as a tool to help make sure that students are ready for whatever they want to tackle post-secondary. And as a former high school principal, I certainly don't believe every student needs to go to college, but I do believe that every student needs to be prepared to train post-secondary so that they have the ability to develop those skills and talents and knowledge necessary to be successful post-high school. So with that, Chair Brandstetter, Dr. Thompson, that's my report. I'm happy to take any questions and take anything back to Dr. Glass that I can for you. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. Next item on the agenda is a report from CP President Thompson. Dr. Thompson, if would you like to give your brief report?
Sure, I'll go through this fairly quickly. There's a lot to talk about. I feel like I say this every time we meet, that I've had a busy few months, but I have to tell you this last few months, in fact, was probably busier than I would have ever anticipated, and maybe some of the more stressful times we've had in higher education. As you all know, this summer, been trying to get all of our campuses open in some fashion or form, in multiple forms actually, and we're happy to say that we did. I've been meeting with the presidents all summer, every week, and looking at exactly what we need to do, meeting heavily with our public health folk, especially Dr. Stack, who's met with us multiple times. I'm sure he's tired of talking with us, but we feel like we did what we needed to do to safely open the campus. Now, the interesting piece of this is you never can account for everything, but we're trying to. We've worked with the governor's office, we've worked with Dr. Stack's office to try to display exactly what's going on with our numbers. If you look on our website, CPE website, you'll see that we've done a really good job of posting that and really being transparent. So we're happy, and I appreciate the governor yesterday highlighting us in that regard. As you well know, we have 4 overarching priorities since I came into this role. The board and I talked about when I first came in, that looks at the value of higher education that's so often been disparaged. And so making it clear, and we found this out on our listening tour, just how many people that really didn't understand the value, not just the economic value, but the civic value, the health value, and I keep on going. You've heard this story way too many times, but it is an important story to tell. We only have about 51% of our high school graduating seniors going to higher ed. If you look at our numbers of unemployed, it's about 86% with no higher ed background. So we've got issues in this area that we're really heavily focused on. We have to focus on affordability, whether it's perceived or whether it's real. Many of our citizens believe that they cannot afford higher ed. So it's our job to make it affordable from a real standpoint, but also make it clear about how they can go to college and pay for it. And so I'm happy to say our campuses have been working with us tremendously. I'm happy, I appreciate the board and our campuses coming in with a 0.7% tuition increase this past year, maybe the lowest in 3 decades. So I do believe that we are not taking this lightly by no stretch of the imaginations. But we're also having to focus on student success, how we get more people through at a faster, more accelerated rate, but how we make sure there's a way that we don't leave anybody behind. And I want to talk in a second quickly about our P20 efforts to make sure that we can really focus on this in a systematic way. And then the last is the quality of the product. I mean, we have to ensure that we have a quality product. The best way I know how to do that is to ask our employers, you know, how are we producing? How do we get these guys on the front end of the conversation and not just the back end when we do our career fairs? So that's been a huge focus of mine, and happy to say we're still in the middle of this COVID pandemic, still working heavily to ensure that that is the case. As you heard yesterday, we're focusing on a P20 systematic process, brought Amanda Ellis in to lead that. We've got more, we have to put more people in that area because it's huge. These transitions are very problematic, whether it's K through 3, which Pritchard has been asked to work on looking at teacher prep in that area, or whether it's any of our transition times, such as from high school to college, from community college to 4-year institutions. We're really trying to figure out how to create a systematic P20 system. And we have best practices. We just have to really get it to focus in the way that we need for it to focus. And Jason, Dr. Glass, Commissioner Glass coming on board, which I'm proud to say I was on the hiring committee that brought him in. You know, we've talked about this in great detail. We were hoping to have something to you by this meeting to where you can endorse, but we'll get that to you. We don't want to wait too long to move on this approach, but we will get material to you, let you have some interaction with it and give us some feedback. But this is an area we've got to focus on. I also want to build a way that we can accelerate innovation. I tell people on our campuses, we're not waiting. We can't wait for innovation. This time is giving us an opportunity to innovate currently, and then we're doing that. And there's a lot of stuff we can talk about, but we also have to think about what is going to be the quote unquote normal for the future. And how then do we use whatever resources we have to focus on that normal? But CPE, we're doing that too. We're changing the way we're using what dollars we have to focus on that innovation that we need for the future and that we need to currently put in place now. We also have developed, we're moving forward on this student-centered web portal that we talked about a while back that will house resources for high school students to look at how they can apply for admissions and financial aid. This one-stop area is going to assist everybody in the Commonwealth to promote where we need to go as far as higher education. As I mentioned a second ago, we're also looking at this workplace, this college to workplace, college to workforce, college to building an economic development system that matters. So we brought on with us for a very small percentage of his time from KCTCS, Dr. Shannon Gilkey, who's the KCTCS Vice Chancellor for Workforce Development. And he's going to be working with us. We just submitted a grant with Secretary of Education and Workforce, a fairly large proposal that if we get funded will help us to move this along. In addition, we have started this big digital media campaign. If you're following us, and hopefully you are following our Twitter, I don't see you all on there. I see Luke more than anyone else, so I appreciate you, Luke. We got to get these other folks engaged. And if you're following us, we're hitting this hard. We've been hitting it hard ever since I came on board, but we're really hitting it hard, talking about how we are listening to all constituency to talk about why Kentucky higher education matters. And we've done a lot along those lines of building networks around my office to help us to do that. The faculty advisory network, a student advisory network. We're building leadership among our faculty and staff of color to really prepare the next generation. We're doing those things that really aligns with what we say our priorities are and what our values are. But once again, we ask for you all to get engaged with us in that area. We're also working with KCTCS and others. We got some money from the Lumen Foundation. As you all know, CPE as a whole, our office has been cut over 55% in the last many years. And we got no mandates taken from us. We even got a few more mandates. So how we've been able to replace people and do our work is through grants that I appreciate Lumina and others who are constantly giving us money to carry this out. But we have a grant we just received from Lumina last year on this Adult Promise grant to show that we do have some free community college in this state with our Work Ready Scholarship to get more adults back engaged in their college experience. And that's going really well. We'd love to talk to you more about that sometimes. Our student advisory group, I have to say, where the rubber meets the road is truly with our students and our faculty and on our campuses. And we, the policy leaders here, have to really know exactly how that's working. So we're getting up-to-date information constantly from our students and faculty, how we even transition this fall, or what are the things we need to do to improve on it. A couple of other items I'll say, and I'll cut it off. I got so much more to talk about, but I won't now. We're reviewing, as you all know by law, the performance funding. This 3 years now has been up. We have data. We see that it's working in some areas. Some areas it's not working. If it was really designed to have new funding put in it to make it work, we haven't got new funding. We've gotten cuts. But I want to say we still have seen behavioral change, and we have seen some of the metrics really working greatly that has really moved us forward in the state. Now, I'm not putting this all on performance funding, but I just want to remind, for us to get to our North Star of 60% attainment by 2030, we had to do about a 1.7% increase. We've been carrying close to a 4 percentage point increase. And the area that I'm really proud of in the last many years, we've had about 11% increase in our credentials and degrees in this state. That has been one of the leaders in the nation. But what I'm really proud of, those that are the most disenfranchised are students of color. We've been able to raise that about 27%, which is one of the largest gap closings we've seen in the state. But we've got a long way to go. So we're looking at that. We're in the process of evaluating a performance funding model as we speak. And by the end of the year, as a matter of fact, December 1st, we have to have a report to the General Assembly along those lines. Chair Brandstatter, several other, I just want to thank all my staff who's working really hard to make things go. The way we're communicating now has been as effective as I've ever seen it. But we, in fact, don't want to slow down, but look for ways that we can even be more innovative as we move into this new normal. That's my quick report, sir. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, President Thompson. Appreciate that update. Are there any questions for President Thompson from the council members before we move on? All right. Oh, did you? Go ahead. Yeah.
Dr. Thompson, thank you for that report. It's just great to hear all the work that the council is doing. I had a quick question on the resource that you mentioned that is in development or is available for the high school to college pathway. I would love to have an opportunity to kind of review it or kind of take a look and see, if there's any feedback council can offer you, members can offer you. I'd love to help you with that effort if possible, please.
You sure may. And just to let the council know, you were one of the people that really pushed us to do this not too long ago. And I'll have Melissa Bell set up some time with you or whomever that wanted to see this. I think you're going to be really impressed also with our program review, how we're connecting that with our employers, how well people are getting the jobs and maintaining them, as well as our curricular complexity, where students can see early if they go into a particular course or a particular college or university, how they can maneuver through that. So absolutely.
That's phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Ron?
Yeah, Dr. Thompson, thank you for the update. Good stuff. Obviously, a lot going on, and I like to ask leaders this question just in general, especially in a time of crisis and challenges in running the business. So, of all the things that are going on and all the things that you and your staff are trying to do, what could you narrow it down to one thing that's keeping you awake at night, and what are you and your staff doing to fix that, or what can we as a board do to help you fix that?
That's an excellent question, and my staff may have a few more answers than I do, but I'll tell you where I'm coming from on this, and very honestly telling you. I mean, as someone who spent a lot of time on campus as well as out there, I'm worried that this pandemic has shown us some really deep divides. Everything from the digital divide, which huge. We already had some growing mental health concerns in higher ed. This pandemic has accelerated that by leaps and bounds, and we can't measure it. I like measuring things because I can then have impact. You know, so what we're doing is trying to figure out digital ways. We've gotten a little money from the governor's office. We got about 13.8 million, as you well know, we've distributed to campuses. The governor and I talked, and we're keeping a little bit back to try to have influence on what I call these big macro things or micro things that can enhance learning. Ron, I can give you a lot of answers to that question. The biggest one is that we already don't have enough students really getting into the pipeline, making it through to get that quality certificate or degree to go in the workforce. Now I think we've got some things that popped out to us during this time of learning, I'll call it, that really tells us that we're going to have to figure out new innovative ways of getting student support, whether it's mental health, emotional health, or physical health, to our students in a manner that they can get it. That's easier than the way we were providing it before. And we are also going to have to really realize that what we've learned here, this new way of doing business, and this is going to be a new way, by the way, how then do we capture that 25% of the people that are not getting that good quality digital understanding because they don't have the internet, or they have terrible internet, or maybe they haven't got the kind of engagement that we need to give them from our faculty and staff and others that would cause them to be able to continue along their learning path. Those are the things that keep me awake at night.
Thank you, President Thompson. Any other council members have any items? I'm trying to scan my screen. All right. Thank you for everybody's input and commentary on that. I'm going to move to item 8 in our agenda, which is the Finance Committee report. The committee met on August 18th, and we reviewed information that was presented to the Interim Budget Review Subcommittee on Education that following day. We also received an update on the funding provided to campuses through the 4 pools of the CARES Act funding that higher education has been able to access. And we were provided with an overview of the discussions from the first meeting of the July 30th working group on performance funding, as and the subsequent meetings have taken place, as Dr. Thompson just alluded to. So the next couple months on that committee are going to be fairly busy with performance funding working group, as well as a budget session that's coming up in January, and then tuition discussions for next spring. So we will be continuing to meet on a monthly basis. And with our new committee, our new council members, we'll be plugging you guys into committees as well. But we'll be working on that with Heather over the course of the next few weeks. The Finance Committee does not have any action items today. So if there's any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, we can move on to the committee report for the Executive Committee. Any questions for Finance at this point in time? All right, seeing none, Executive Committee met on August 6th, and we also discussed a performance funding meeting from July 30th, as well as campus reopening plans. The committee does not have any action items for recommendation. However, I would like to take this time to make a committee appointment. Colby Burks, as the student representative to the board, your insight is valuable in every area of our work. Therefore, I do want to appoint you to the Finance Committee, the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee, and the Committee on Equal Opportunities, effective on your appointment date. All these meetings do have a virtual attendance option, even when we're not in the middle of a pandemic. So I hope those are able to fit in your schedule, Colby. Also, coming up over the next several months, the Executive Committee will be discussing the process for President Thompson's annual evaluation, the distribution of $1.5 million in gear reserve funds that was alluded to earlier, and a potential budget cut for the current fiscal year. Just a heads up to Executive Committee members, we may need to have a phone call later on this week, because I think a draft of that is due on the 18th, but I'll be working with President Thompson and the staff on that. So kind of a short timeline as that topic develops. I do anticipate also the Executive Committee talking about some outcomes and action items from the Moody's report that we had today as well. So that'll be on discussion topics with Executive Committee over the course of the next couple of months. Are there any other comments or questions with respect to Executive Committee before we move on?
Chair Brandstetter, I just wanted to point out on the Finance Committee and Executive Committee, the state has been asked to do an 8% budget cut scenario for our campuses as well as for our office. So that's what Chair Brandstetter was referring to. This 8%, I'm happy to say, wasn't as bad as I thought it possibly could be. If you look at the amount of shortfall that was expecting to happen, it's still a fairly devastating hit, as you can imagine, that accumulates over the many years of cuts that we've had. So as Chair Brandstetter said, he's been working with our office, looking at all different ways of being strategic about this. But we did want to have the Executive Committee to have a chance to interact with us on it.
All right. Thank you very much. Next up is our recent research and data reports. David Mahan I see his video has just joined us. David, there we go. David has been the kind of the data guy for the council, and I guess David, you've been with us, I guess maybe 2 years now.
Actually,
kind of hard to keep track.
Yes, they're about three and a half years.
3.5. Okay, all right. Time flies when we're having fun, I guess. But one of the things that I do miss about the current meeting that we have is kind of the KPI dashboard, or the placemat, as I call it. So I do want to make sure we get back to that as soon as we can, and hopefully with data from fall of 2020, so we can get that. I know that's always kind of tentative at this point in time, but we need to get back to looking at some of those leading indicators and seeing how we're doing. David is going to, in my notes, say he's going to provide us a brief. I also think it's going to be a brief on dual credit and the effect of this. And I do think this is really moving the needle, especially as we engage high school students and get them into the pipeline. So, David, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Brandstetter. So we released last week a report from our dual credit research. It's the first of a 3-part report. This report is focused on those students that matriculated or enrolled at a four-year public university. I'd like to first thank our research staff. We have a tremendous amount of talent, and I just want to make sure that we're aware of the folks that are working so hard on these projects. And I hope to either get these guys on Zoom or face-to-face in the coming meetings for you guys. So the big takeaway here is that dual credit participation has skyrocketed. And so we're at 75% increase over this 5-year trend. And you'll note there in the 2016-17, where much of the growth really began to take place, was around the dual credit scholarship. And then it continued with the expansion of the work there in 2018-19. So much of this is about state dollars and access. But what's really important is that you see the growth across all the sectors. And so all our institutional partners are participating in dual credit. And it is, as you'll see in this first report, paying dividends for our students. So the research question is pretty straightforward here. So we ask the question of, for those students that matriculated at a four-year public university from the state of Kentucky, how were their grades in their first year and how many persisted into the second year? And then we disaggregate that by race, gender, income, and college preparedness so that we can look at the effect of the dual credit experience. In terms of access, those first two bullets there will not be a surprise to any of our board members, that females are more likely to participate, white, Asian are more likely to participate, and then the underrepresented minority groups are less likely to participate. But the third bullet is very, very encouraging. So the number of low-income students from low-income backgrounds in 2017 actually surpassed the number of non-low income students in terms of participation. So this really gives us encouragement that we can continue to push this dual credit experience in high school. But what is also a bit sobering is that when we combine low income with URM, students of color, then this is no longer the case. And so the big takeaway in this research is that we have to do a better job to reach out to especially our minority students who are not participating at the same rates as their white and Asian counterparts. So I have two data slides, and I think they're pretty easy to digest, but please, we'll answer any questions. So the first is, if we compare dual enrollment, our dual credit students in terms of persistence to their second year, how they compare for those students that did not participate in dual credit. And so you see a significant difference for the participants from those that did not participate. So I often get the question, folks will say, Dave, this is pretty obvious because those students that are more academically prepared and more motivated, they typically participate in dual credit. But what's important in these statistical analysis is that you realize that we've controlled for those factors as much as we possibly can. And so in other words, after leveling the playing field, we see an isolation of dual credit, and we still see a significant difference in second year persistence in comparing those that participated and those that didn't. Maybe even more important is the box to the right, where we saw the magnitude, or what we sometimes say is the impact on these certain groups, even more important for low income white and Asian students and low income minority students. And so in other words, those students that need the help the most, that are highest risk for attrition, are benefiting the most from a dual credit experience. And in my final data slide, in a similar way, this is looking at the probability of earning a 3.0 GPA in the first year of college. And you can see that the effect of dual credit was again significant, comparing those that participated and those that didn't. And as we look at the subgroups, it was a similar impact, a more powerful impact for low-income white or Asian students and low-income minority students, but also male students. It helps close that gap of performance for our male students. And then I think the most surprising thing that we found, the C and B grade level students. And so this is a little different statistical test, but I put it on the same slide so that it would be easy to understand. So for those students that were at a 2.25 GPA in their first year or a 3.0 GPA, we saw a larger impact of the dual credit experience in terms of moving the needle on their performance, on their GPA, than those that were A students. And so that makes sense if you think about it, because the A students typically are doing well, you know, with or without that dual credit experience. But this really goes to, again, those students that need it the most. And I'll leave you with this. We think that starting early in high school with dual credit has a twofold effect, and this is directly from the literature. You know, first, that we're affirming students' beliefs and their confidence that they can do college level coursework, and that's especially important for first generation students, low income students of color. And then the second piece is what we use this word often is pathways. And so if we can get students taking coursework that aligns with what they might want to do, then when they do matriculate into higher education, they're on a pathway, so to speak, that hopefully will lead them to a more efficient completion. And so within those two things, we feel like this is having a big impact. Again, this is just the first of a three-part series. This is on the students that enrolled at a four-year public university. The second will be focused on KCTCS, those students that enroll in KCTCS. And then the third, we're really going to look at the high school experience and which courses they took and the performance in those courses. So we're going to partner with our sister agency, KY Stats, to do a comprehensive analysis of the high school experience. So much more to come, but we're super excited about this project. If you want to go to the next slide, Heather, I'd like to just very briefly, Chair Brandstatter, turn it over to Dr. Amanda Ellis, who is our Associate Vice President for P20 initiatives, because she has really taken these action items and turning those into discussions and plans for our constituents.
Thank you so much, David. So just to touch base on a little bit about what I mentioned briefly yesterday, is this is the type of research that exactly drives us to go back and look at what Dr. Melissa Bell had already started with her staff on the dual credit policy and engaging in conversation of how far we've come and but where we need to go. And to President Thompson's point about him being awake at night on the disparity of the Great Divide, whether that be technology or whatever that may be, mine is really in the same vein of equitable access. Clearly, there is a positive impact when students have access, when they are exposed to advanced level coursework with a belief system that they can succeed. And it to me is a bit comforting that our research came out like this, because there are national studies, one being Opportunity Myth, that talks about the importance of providing opportunities for all students that are rigorous and that there's a belief system in which that they can succeed, and they typically do. And so there's that piece. And even with advanced coursework, with exposure to rigorous coursework, rigorous opportunities for literature and to be held accountable, really helps students step up to the plate to really perform and be better prepared as they enter a post-secondary institution. And so we're really anxious to use this data as David and his team provide that to help drive our conversations with K-12 as well as post-secondary to improve the system. We know that it is far from perfect. And as the opportunities have come available, the Work Ready Scholarship has already been mentioned today. The dual credit scholarship really provides opportunities for every student to have access who take dual credit for 2 courses to be paid for. And that is an incredible gift that many may not even know about or don't take advantage of or don't have access to. And so that's what we're digging in to look at who does have access. How do we improve enrollment? How do we diversify our enrollment? And I really want to encourage you, I'm sure David will mention it, the webinar that we'll be having this week. On Thursday, we will be having a student, actually a Murray State student, Lexi Riddle, who is going to share her story about her opportunity for dual credit, the fact that an adult in her high school saw potential that she did not see. She came up with a very challenging background and is succeeding at Murray. And she's just one of many examples that I feel assured that is happening in the state of Kentucky. So I hope you'll tune into that. I know Heather will probably send that information out to you to make sure you have it. But I would encourage you to engage with us in that webinar and help us to move forward with our P20 initiatives. So thank you, David. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. And I'll also say, in addition to the webinar, we have an interactive report on dual credit, which is on our data center, and it shows access, and there's a map of Kentucky. And so you can look at county and institution and URM status and so much more. And so we'd really like to empower our board members to get into the data with us and push us forward. And so I'm so glad you mentioned the Thursday webinar. President Thompson has done so much work with dual credit, and he's going to kick it off for us. And we have an esteemed panel. Like you said, a student warms all our hearts to get a student voice in here. And so I think it's going to be a really good discussion. So with that, let me turn to my final report, preliminary enrollment. In the COVID-19 environment, we certainly have received many data requests in terms of what's going on campus and are we going to see an enrollment shift? Is there going to be a gap year? What are adults doing that have been displaced in this COVID-19 environment? Typically, we would defer to the campuses. Enrollment is very complicated. President Thompson has been an enrollment leader and an academic leader and all the rest, and he can tell you that there's so much nuance in these data points, and we like our presidents to be able to talk about it. But with the push of looking at overall state numbers and really trying to understand where we are, we felt it critical that our board members be informed on what's going on campus. So let me just give you 2 takeaway items, and we'll go through. I only have 4 slides, so I think we can get through it quickly, and it's pretty easy to digest. As Associate Commissioner Akers just said, what's really driving enrollment and some good news on enrollment is this traditional age student. This class of high school class graduating in the spring of 2020 was very motivated to get to campus. And we are seeing gains, and I'll show you in a subsequent slide, we're seeing gains in those first-time students. And so we're very excited about that, keeping more of our in-state students at home and still recruiting a significant proportion of out-of-state students as well. So you see up there in the top right-hand corner, the 4-year public, this is overall credential-seeking undergraduates. And so I'll just tell you, my second takeaway there is that for the adults, and you see KCTCS there in the middle, seeing significant decreases, there's typically a lag time between displaced adults and re-enrollment in academic programs that skill or provide new careers. And so that gap in 2008 was about a year, right? So KCTCS still could see a big bump going forward, but right now they're seeing a big decline. And as President Williams said yesterday, that's mostly around adult students. And so they're about 10% down with adult students, 25 years and up. Overall, they're between about 7 and 9% down on that 1-year look. So the other important piece to the credential seeking undergrads is we're keeping a close eye on our minority students, our students of color. Some of you may have read in the past couple of weeks a national report from the Clearinghouse tracking on African-American students and their decline at the 2-year college level. We are seeing that as well. As you see, KCTCS at the 7.2% decline. So, this is an important evaluation, considering that, many students may be nervous about going back to re-enroll, especially, in a face-to-face or a hybrid environment. So you can see at KCTCS, there was pretty steady gains with URM students, from fall 15 to fall 19, and then a big drop off in the preliminary enrollment for fall 20. And so we definitely want to keep a close eye on that. Four-year publics, again, they are being fueled by these traditional age students. And so we're seeing continued growth there. IQ, the privates have increased 15% over 5 years, a slight decrease with URM this past year. And we'll want to keep a close eye on that as well. Next slide, please, Heather. So to the first year undergraduate students, so this is what we say is the freshman class, right? And it's flat at Kentucky public universities. And you might say, well, that's, a lukewarm, bit of news, but really not the case. There was so much discussion of gap years and finances and folks not being able to go to college or afraid, to go back. And they have really come out in droves. And as a matter of fact, 4 of our 8 universities have seen an increase in those freshman classes. And if you look at it relative to, the 5-year trend, we're down 5%. Being flat this year is extraordinary. Similar returns on the IQ side, pretty flat this year. About a third of the campuses are actually up with their freshman classes. That is a bit of a change from their 5-year because they've had so much increase in their 5-year first-time student population. And last slide, please, Heather. So we also want to look at the grad numbers. This is an important revenue stream. Certainly, there's been much talk of international students and not attending. Most of our institutions had already been flat or declining with international students, so that did not hit their enrollment as hard as it might in other states. Suffice it to say, really positive news on both sides, on the 4-year public and on the private. You can see big growth for the 4-year public in the last 3 years, which is surprising because we were flat the 3 years prior. And much of this growth is around the healthcare and our master's in nursing programs, and especially at a couple of campuses that have really focused on that. The private side, you see massive growth. This is online coursework in the computer science area with 2 of their institutions, and you see they've increased 300% over the last 5 years. So I'll stop it there. Heather, if you want to go to the final slide, I can, or actually you could take down the PowerPoint altogether and we can entertain any conversations.
This is Thank you. Go ahead, Christy.
Sorry, Ben. This is Christy. I just wanted to go back to the dual credit. I think it's an awesome program. Again, I think one of the fundamental weaknesses that persists is whether the relevancy of the dual credit achieved is applicable to the field of study or major that the student is pursuing. And I just think that's a real opportunity for close coordination between higher ed and whether it's the counseling or whatever in the high schools. So just, again, I'm not sharing anything that you guys don't already know, but it is something that as I talk to college students and their sort of inability to apply those dual credits effectively, that I think kids still continue to struggle with. And I'd love to hear from Colby on that front if he has any input, but definitely think that's an area we could improve.
You know, before Colby jumps in, I guess I want to say three things that you're going to see, Christy, in our P20 piece on dual credit. One is the relevancy. In other words, are we aligning these into a pathway? And that's important to know. We found out on listening to her, it was not uncommon for people to have 35, 36 hours of dual credit, and 12 of them didn't count for anything. So that's important. The second one is quality. How do we ensure that quality is good, is there, and it is college level quality, and it crosses over whether or not you're teaching it in high school or in college? But I think the third one truly is to be able to do more data work about finding out, does it accelerate college completion? Does it do the things that we purport that it needs to do for all the groups concerned? How do we get more people of color to be engaged in it on the front end? Amanda and her team will be working exactly in that P20 effort to focus on that, because we do know it works. So now we have to figure out at what level it can work, how big it can get, and how we get the support that we need to make sure that it's aligned with where our particular 60 by 30 goal is aligned. Colby, I'm sorry to step on your conversation there.
No, I mean, if there's time, I have a question, but I'll prime my question too. I think that the dual credit numbers are extremely impressive, but I think it's also very showing of some shortcomings, I think, in high school education in Kentucky a lot of the time. I myself was a dual credit student, and I did better. I had a unique experience. I went to EKU's campus twice a week for my dual credit classes. So I was in the college classes, which are kind of different than normal, I guess. But I did better in those classes than in my high school classes. And my GPA was at best a 3.5 in high school, and I failed to not get a 4.0 any semester at Morehead. So I did better in college. My twin brother has a plethora of learning disabilities. He says he's the medley of learning disabilities, as he calls himself. But in high school, he struggled greatly. And then he got to college, and he didn't, and he was on Dean's List every single semester of college. And he also went to Morehead. But I think when I go back to saying I think it's a shortcoming in high school education, dual credit's allowing people to go ahead and feel what they feel when they get to college. Is the fact that they are good enough to have that higher education, and they believe in themselves a little bit. And I think that's even further exacerbated by the fact that they can do stuff and learn stuff that they're interested in and want to do for the rest of their lives. So I guess my question was, maybe not even a question, was, is there any data, I guess, based on how successful someone was in high school versus how successful they are in college that went through those dual credit programs? Because my point I'm trying to make is, when people are in these dual credit programs, they seem to succeed a lot more, I think, because they start to believe in themselves. So it doesn't just allow them more of an education. It truly, I think, changes what they believe in themselves, which is going to make it more conducive for their success.
It's so well put, Colby. I'll just say in our third 3.0, we're calling it, with our dual credit evaluation, we're going to look at the return on investment and the efficiency of completing a degree, whether it actually saved money. And then we're also going to look at the complexity of that coursework. And I think, as I said, the big advantages of having a P20 data system through our KY Stats partner is that we can look at not only dual credit through the coursework, but we'll also look at AP, advanced placement, and IB, baccalaureate, to see, where the growth is and where the more positive experiences have been, and how that played out for the students. And so more to come. That 3.0 will be our biggest part of the study. The 2.0 will look just like this study, but it'll be KCTCS. So we're very excited. But I think what you're saying is a real voice. So thank you for it.
Hey, Colby, I want to answer your question even more specific. This data shows us that David just presented, that African-American students, for an example, that after they took everything out, after they held everything constant, they saw a jump into the second year. So that's one indicator of your answer. The other thing, and I want to tell the board, when I came aboard, we got rid of developmental education for no credit as we know it on our 4-year campuses, and KCTCS can only offer one. We're seeing, we're seeing better learning, deeper learning, more complete learning when we put the kind of inputs into helping students succeed, and they're getting credit for these courses. So they didn't dumb the courses down. Please understand, they increased the rigor and they're succeeding. So the point being is that if that's any indicator, or if that's a correlation, and I argue that it is, if you look at all the variables that go into both of those, that it's college level course, people can do it if they've been given a chance and been given the assistance or the input to achieve it, then my argument is in fact, yes. And we'll find more of that out once we have more longitudinal data, true enough. We can then just, look at it in its disparate sense. But in your question, I think, in fact, it does show that the early indicators, the early data are showing that.
All right. Any other follow-up questions for David? I'm trying to scan my screen to see if anybody has their hand raised. If not, Richard, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. David, just thank you for your report. I've got a question on the increase in graduate school enrollment in the private school, almost 300%. Could you speak a little bit more on that? I think you touched on that was due to online learning, but could you speak a little more to that? That's a huge increase and an impressive number. And I'm wondering what maybe the public graduate schools could learn from that, or maybe implement to maybe not see that kind of increase, but something that would move us in that direction. But could you speak to that?
Absolutely. So those are online master's programs in computer science. There's 2 of them that are being offered, but they're being offered nationally, and they've gained much traction in terms of their marketing and ability to deliver it online. And so it's not just Kentucky students, it's out-of-state students. And so that's become a huge revenue stream for those 2 campuses that helps them in multiple ways. And so there is much discussion of offering online programs and being able to deliver it to folks across the nation. And many of our publics are getting into that space, but none have been as successful as these 2 programs in terms of delivering it, especially to out-of-state students.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments before we move on? David, Amanda, thank you very much for your report, and look forward to more of that quantitative analysis over the course of the next few months. Item 11 is our campus good news reports. Several of the campuses have provided written reports in your materials, so take a look at those if you have not already. Based upon my boxes, we still have, I believe, 3 presidents that are still on the line. This is always the most dangerous part of my job, is asking the university president if they want to add any content to our meeting. But I will ask President Caboni, President Morgan, President Jackson, would any of you guys like to add anything this morning?
Just that it's really great to have students back on campus. I appreciate my colleagues and colleagues at CPE for the tremendous effort that we've all made together to return to in-person and hybrid instruction. And I would suggest the group and everyone who's watching this meeting should be proud of the remarkable effort that all of us have made.
Thank you, Tim. That's President Morgan.
Mr. Chairman and group, thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to listen in today. Good discussion. I would echo President Caboni and probably my other presidential colleagues on here that CPE has been very good to work with, Dr. Thompson and staff through this. It's been a challenging environment over the past 6 months, as many of you know, as you live on and off of a campus. But I will compliment Kentucky higher ed in general, and that I think we've all done a fantastic job. We do acknowledge we have a ways to go here, and uh,
Uh,
we'll continue to modify and adapt, and appreciate the support of the council.
Thank you, Tim. That's President Morgan. Mr. Chairman, and group, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments before we move on?
Mr. Chairman and group, thank you, and appreciate the support of the council.
Mr. Chair, I would just add, I spent a great deal of time with you yesterday, but I want to thank President Thompson, the CPE staff, and all of you for what you do for higher education in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And anytime that we can be of help to you, please let us know. It's good to see everyone.
All right, thank you very much. And thanks for hanging tough with us today as we rolled through our content, and hopefully it was informative for everybody. Other business, I don't have anything else on my agenda. Does anybody else have anything they would like to address before we adjourn this morning? I will say that our next meeting is November 12th to the 13th is when that is scheduled. If it is in person, it would be tentatively in Frankfurt. But if you could just make sure you block out a little bit of time on the 12th and 13th, and we'll be followed up with either the location or the link, depending on how that comes together. I have been taking a number of notes during the meeting today about some of the content that I'd like to see us dig into at our next meeting. If there's anything that a council member or a president would like for us to dig deeper into, please let me know. Shoot me an email, text, phone call, however we want to. We can even set up a separate Zoom meeting if so needed. But I would like to just get the content because this medium is challenging. We want to make sure it's engaging and interesting to everybody that is participating. So please do that over the course of the next few weeks if an idea does pop in your head. Mr. Ferris, Mr. Weaver, Colby, welcome. We look forward to working with you. Hopefully get to meet you in person at some point in time in the very near future. If not anything else, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn until our next opportunity to get together.
So moved. I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Good to see everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Good to see
everyone.
everybody.
Good to see everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.